Dublin, March 1986. Every night, the Provisional IRA checked into Ireland's safest hotel believing the war stopped at the border. The Shelbourne was neutral ground. No guns, no raids, no British reach. But room keys never sleep. At 02:14 hours, while commanders drank brandy and planned Belfast operations, the night manager lifted the guest register and photographed every name. One man, one master key, one camera labeled Asset D17. For 6 years, the IRA's leadership slept inside a British intelligence operation. This is Operation Shelbourne. Patrick O'Brien was born in 1949 in Dublin's north inner city. The neighborhood learned early how violence ripples outward from politics. By age 12, O'Brien had watched 2 neighbors arrested during a loyalist march. By 17, he understood that surviving in Dublin meant keeping your head down and your opinions quieter. What made him operationally valuable was simpler than ideology. Discretion became reflex. Associates described him as polite but forgettable, never the type to offer opinions at the pub. He moved through rooms like background furniture. People forgot he was listening. By the early 1980s, O'Brien had risen to night manager at the Shelbourne Hotel. The position was built on trust. Diplomats checked in without worry. Politicians held quiet meetings in the smoking lounge. Businessmen conducted deals they couldn't conduct in London. And increasingly, Sinn Féin operatives and Provisional IRA figures used the hotel precisely because it sat firmly inside the Republic of Ireland. No British jurisdiction, no MI6 raids, no surveillance teams photographing license plates in the car park. The hotel's reputation was its shield. The Shelbourne had hosted everyone from visiting royalty to divorce lawyers arranging settlements. Privacy was the product. O'Brien was the gatekeeper. The defining event came in November 1985. Enniskillen, a bomb detonated during a Remembrance Day ceremony. 11 civilians dead. O'Brien watched the news alone in the staff office after his shift ended. The images replayed on loop. Elderly veterans, a nurse, a retired headmistress. According to later Garda debriefs, this was the moment his neutrality collapsed. He didn't make a decision that night. The decision accumulated over weeks. He started noticing patterns. Certain guests arrived together but checked in separately. Room requests clustered on specific floors. Late-night phone calls routed through reception after he'd gone off shift. Small details that individually meant nothing. By February 1986, O'Brien had reached a conclusion he never spoke aloud. If the IRA felt safe enough to coordinate operations from inside his hotel, they'd gotten too comfortable. And comfort bred carelessness. His defining skill in one sentence: Patrick O'Brien controlled access when everyone else was asleep, and no one ever questioned him. British intelligence doctrine during the mid-Troubles emphasized access over force. The logic was brutal in its simplicity. Direct penetration of IRA leadership in the Republic was politically explosive. If British operatives were caught running surveillance in Dublin, the diplomatic fallout would torpedo cooperation agreements that had taken years to build. The Irish government couldn't be seen tolerating British intelligence operations on sovereign soil. Surveillance teams risked immediate exposure. IRA counter-surveillance protocols were sophisticated. Known faces got burned, cars got identified, safe houses got compromised, and signals intelligence failed indoors. You couldn't intercept conversations happening in hotel rooms with thick walls and no phones. The solution followed a long-standing human principle the Americans had codified after the Second World War. Exploit trusted environments, not hardened targets. Instead of chasing commanders through Belfast streets where they expected pursuit, identify places where they relaxed operational discipline. Hotels, restaurants, golf clubs, locations where the target's psychology shifted from combatant to civilian. The Shelbourne was ideal. Central Dublin location. Reputable enough that staying there didn't raise suspicions. Frequently used for Sinn Féin political coordination between Belfast operations and Dublin support networks. And critically, it was a place where IRA leadership believed they were completely safe. Three obstacles dominated initial planning. First, no British operational footprint could exist in Dublin. Any MI6 presence discovered would destroy Garda cooperation. Second, IRA counter-surveillance awareness remained high even in the Republic. Commanders rotated accommodations. They watched for patterns. They noted faces. Third, the risk of exposing Garda MI6 cooperation threatened to destabilize the entire intelligence sharing framework that both services depended on. The trigger came in March 1986 when Garda Special Branch identified O'Brien during a routine background check. He wasn't the target. An investigation into financial irregularities at another Dublin hotel had prompted reviews of senior staff at similar establishments. O'Brien's file showed nothing remarkable. No political affiliations, no criminal record, no debts, no leverage. But two details caught attention. First, his work history showed extraordinary discretion. 7 years at the Shelbourne without a single complaint. Second, a Garda informant had mentioned O'Brien asking careful questions about Enniskillen in a pub conversation. Not angry questions, analytical ones. Who benefits from killing pensioners at a memorial service? What does that accomplish? Garda Special Branch passed O'Brien's name to their MI6 liaison with a single-line assessment. Ideologically persuadable and structurally positioned. Planning shifted to execution. Within 8 weeks, all elements would be in position. But first, O'Brien needed to be approached without spooking him. The recruitment happened in April 1986, not in a dark alley, not in a safe house. In the hotel's staff parking area at 0630 hours when O'Brien arrived for an inventory check. 2 Garda officers, plain clothes. They identified themselves as Special Branch and asked if he had 15 minutes. O'Brien's first instinct was that he'd done something wrong. The officers were careful. They didn't mention MI6. They didn't mention espionage. They framed cooperation as civic duty. They knew about Enniskillen. They knew he'd been watching the news. They mentioned that certain guests at the Shelbourne were connected to ongoing investigations. Not arrests, investigations. They needed help identifying patterns. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that would put him at risk. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. O'Brien asked 2 questions. First, would this involve police coming to the hotel? No. Second, would his name appear in any official capacity? Never. He agreed on the condition that he could stop at any time. The officers said they understood. They gave him a phone number, a contact named Brennan. If he saw anything worth reporting, call from a public phone box. That was all. O'Brien called the number 6 days later. He'd noticed 3 men checking in separately, but meeting in the same room on the 3rd floor. The Garda officers met him again, this time in a car park 2 kilometers from the hotel. They asked about room numbers, arrival times, how long the guests stayed. During that second meeting, O'Brien experienced what handlers call legend drift. The psychological moment when cooperation stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like identity. He wasn't reporting suspicious activity. He was becoming an informant. The distinction mattered. One was civic duty. The other was something else entirely. In the post-operation psychological assessment conducted years later in Canada, Evaluators noted that O'Brien never experienced moral ambiguity about the outcome. He experienced it about the method. Photographing guest registers felt like violating hospitality. Using a master key to enter rooms felt like theft. But he reconciled it by framing the targets as people who'd already violated something larger. They'd turned his hotel into an operations center. He was simply responding to that violation. But the mission continued. By May 1986, the Garda officers introduced a third man. Didn't give a name. British accent, expensive suit. The man explained that the information O'Brien provided had been valuable. More could be done, but it would require additional steps. O'Brien was offered 4,000 Irish pounds per month. Cash, delivered quarterly. No bank transfers, no paper trail. The money would come from Garda Special Branch, but originated from a British operational fund designated Protocol Night Desk 3. He was given a code name, Asset D17. Equipment was simple. A Minox-style sub-miniature camera concealed inside a toiletries kit. Film rolls would be collected during quarterly payments. Instructions were explicit. Photograph guest registers. Photograph passport details if accessible. Photograph any documents left visible in rooms. Never rearrange anything. Never touch personal items unnecessarily. Never spend more than 90 seconds inside any room. O'Brien asked what would happen if he got caught. The British liaison was direct. The Garda would disavow knowledge. MI6 would claim no involvement. O'Brien would face criminal charges for trespassing, theft, possibly violations of the Official Secrets Act. No extraction plan existed because extraction would confirm British involvement. He accepted anyway. Later assessments concluded that O'Brien wasn't motivated primarily by money. The payments mattered, but the psychology centered on something else. Control. For years, he'd watched powerful people operate with impunity. Now he held leverage they didn't know existed. The operations architecture was elegant in its simplicity. No elaborate cover required. O'Brien's real job was the cover. Infrastructure was the hotel itself. Guest registers stored behind reception. Passport photocopies filed in the manager's office during check-in verification procedures. Master key access justified by his position. Communication protocols minimized exposure. O'Brien never met handlers at the hotel. Film drops occurred during his commute. He would leave exposed rolls inside a newspaper at a designated bench in St. Stephen's Green. Collection happened within 2 hours. Developed photographs went to Garda Special Branch, then to MI6 London Station via diplomatic pouch. No handler on site. No emergency contact during operational hours. No backup. 6-year operational horizon with quarterly reviews. By June 1986, O'Brien had photographed his first actionable intelligence. 3 IRA commanders checked in, using aliases. Rooms booked through a Sinn Féin administrative contact. O'Brien documented names from the register, passport numbers from the office files, and room locations. The intelligence identified 2 men wanted for questioning in connection with arms smuggling. Within 6 weeks, both were arrested during a separate operation in Dundalk. The first complication emerged in July 1987. A Sinn Féin liaison nearly caught O'Brien photographing the guest ledger at 0240 hours. O'Brien had checked the corridor. Clear. He'd positioned the camera. The liaison appeared from the stairwell, not the elevator. Wrong direction. O'Brien's cover was a fabricated fire alarm drill logged later as Incident S4. Hotel protocol required checking guest registers during drills. The explanation held. Barely. The vulnerability window stabilized after IRA leadership began standardizing use of the Shelbourne's East Wing. Floors 3 and 4. adjoining rooms for late-night meetings. The pattern became predictable. Friday and Saturday arrivals, departures Monday morning. From that point, O'Brien's access became routine. The operation entered its execution phase. The window was unlimited. Each operation followed identical architecture. Timing mattered more than technique. O'Brien's shift began at 2200 hours. He managed front desk operations until 0100 hours when the night receptionist took over. Between 0140 and 0310 hours, hotel foot traffic dropped to near zero. Garda surveillance teams monitoring the exterior confirmed minimal vehicle movement during this window. The infrastructure was already in place. Guest registers sat in a locked drawer behind reception. O'Brien held the key. Passport photocopies were filed alphabetically in the manager's office. O'Brien had unrestricted access. The master key system used mechanical locks, model Abloy Classic, standard across Irish hospitality. No electronic logs, no digital traces. Documents required for each operation included guest registers showing names and room assignments, passport photocopies containing photographs and identity numbers, and any correspondence left at reception for room delivery. Equipment consisted of the MI6 sub-miniature camera, 35mm film rated for low-light conditions, and a small LED pen light for illuminating documents without triggering motion sensors. The team structure was deliberately minimal. O'Brien worked alone during hotel operations. Garda Special Branch provided external surveillance, tracking guest arrivals and departures to identify patterns. MI6 London Station analyzed intelligence, cross-referencing names against existing databases and operational profiles. Compartmentalization ensured O'Brien knew only his immediate task to prevent comprehensive compromise if caught. The planning consumed 18 months of pattern analysis before full-scale documentation began. By November 1987, O'Brien had established reliable access to IRA leadership visiting Dublin. He had 48 hours between guest check-in and intelligence transmission to London. March 15, 1988. At 23:45 hours, 3 men checked into the Shelbourne using business conference credentials. O'Brien processed registration normally. Polite, professional, unremarkable. Room assignments placed them on the 4th floor, East Wing, rooms 412, 414, and 416. Over the next 6 hours, O'Brien documented their presence. At 01:55 hours, he photographed the guest register showing names, arrival times, and room numbers. The camera's shutter made no sound. Exposure time, 3 seconds per page. Total documentation, 4 register pages. Return to locked drawer, 8 seconds. By 02:20 hours, O'Brien accessed the manager's office. Passport photocopies were filed under false names matching registration. He photographed each document. 3 Irish passports. One showed signs of alteration, slightly misaligned lamination on the photograph page. O'Brien noted the passport number, PA 7834192. Later analysis confirmed it as a known forgery linked to arms procurement operations. The vulnerability window opened at 02:40 hours. O'Brien used the master key to access room 412. The occupant was absent, likely meeting in one of the adjacent rooms. Documents were spread across the desk. O'Brien photographed each page where it lay. No rearranging, no touching. 3 sheets contained handwritten notes referencing Belfast street names and numeric codes. 1 envelope bore a return address in Crossmaglen. Total time inside the room, 72 seconds. What the subject didn't know was that the hotel's security system had been modified 3 months earlier. Motion sensors on floors 3 and 4 now excluded a 40-minute window between 02:30 and 03:10 hours. The modification was logged as maintenance addressing false alarms triggered by cleaning staff. The real purpose was providing O'Brien undetected access. The execution process repeated across rooms 414 and 416. Each entry, 60 to 90 seconds. Total photographic intelligence, 23 document pages, 12 passport images, and 4 environmental photographs showing room layouts and visible materials. By 03:15 hours, O'Brien had returned to the front desk. Film secured in the toiletries kit. Master key returned to its hook. Register drawer locked. No evidence of access remained. The operational rhythm continued. Weeks passed with no activity worth documenting. Then clusters of arrivals that demanded multiple consecutive nights of access. O'Brien learned to read patterns. Certain check-in behaviors signaled operational meetings, requests for late checkout, adjoining room preferences, cash payments instead of credit cards. June 1988. At 0200 hours, while O'Brien photographed documents in room 307, a phone rang in the adjacent room. Sound carried through walls. He froze, waited. The ringing stopped. Conversation began, muffled but audible. He recognized one voice from previous encounters. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. When silence returned, O'Brien completed documentation and exited. Intelligence analysts reviewing that night's film identified references to a planned bombing in Newry. Cross-referenced with signals intelligence, the information enabled a preemptive raid. Bomb-making materials were discovered in a farmhouse outside Camlo. 3 arrests, 0 casualties. O'Brien was never told about the outcome. Protocol prohibited feedback that might compromise operational security. He documented and transmitted. Others acted. The compartmentalization protected everyone. Over the next 4 years, the operation expanded within carefully controlled parameters. O'Brien identified 73 IRA commanders and Sinn Féin liaisons. The documentation enabled interception of 8 bombing attempts through coordinated Garda Russi operations. 12 active service unit members were arrested during separate raids, informed partly by Shelbourne intelligence. August 1989. During a routine documentation operation, O'Brien encountered the first significant psychological pressure point. He entered room 420 using standard procedure. Documents were minimal, but a framed photograph sat on the nightstand. Family portrait, woman and 2 children, the target's family. O'Brien photographed it according to protocol, documenting everything visible in the room. Later, alone in the staff office, he thought about that photograph. The woman and children had no operational relevance. They weren't targets. They hadn't chosen involvement. But their husband and father had made choices that put them in O'Brien's camera frame. The moral calculus wasn't clean. It never had been. In psychological debriefs conducted during his Canadian resettlement, O'Brien described this as the operation's inflection point, not the point where he questioned whether to continue. The point where he accepted that what he was doing had costs that he couldn't calculate. Intelligence work trafficked in abstractions, preventing future bombings, disrupting logistics networks. But the people he photographed were concrete. They had families, routines, lives that would be disrupted when arrests happened. He reconciled it by returning to Enniskillen. 11 dead. The woman in the photograph had a husband who participated in an organization that planted bombs at civilian gatherings. The moral algebra wasn't balanced, but it pointed in a direction O'Brien could justify. But doubt never fully disappeared. It became operational background noise. The methodology evolved with experience. Initially, O'Brien photographed everything, every document, every visible paper. MI6 analysts requested more selective targeting, focus on communications, correspondence, notes containing names or locations, reduce film waste, increase signal-to-noise ratio. By 1990, O'Brien had refined his approach. He could assess a room's intelligence value within 20 seconds of entry. Documents containing operational content had specific characteristics. Handwritten notes, maps, lists, typed correspondence on specific letterhead. He ignored newspapers, magazines, personal letters obviously unrelated to IRA activity. The listening devices were deployed only twice, both times under desk lamps in rooms where extended meetings were scheduled. Battery limited to 72 hours. Audio quality was poor. Concrete walls, ambient noise. The transcripts yielded minimal actionable intelligence. After the second deployment, MI6 discontinued the practice. The risk of discovery outweighed the intelligence value. October 19, 1990. At 02:50 hours, O'Brien accessed room 314. Standard documentation procedure. He photographed the guest register earlier, showing 2 occupants, both using Sinn Féin political credentials. Inside the room, documents were spread across both beds. Unusual volume. He photographed methodically. One document detailed a planned demonstration in Belfast. Another outlined contingency responses if violence erupted. A third contained what appeared to be safe house addresses in Derry. O'Brien photographed all of it. Total time, 98 seconds. Slightly over protocol limits, but justified by volume. 2 weeks later, the demonstration occurred. Violence erupted exactly as the contingency document predicted. But security forces had prepositioned based on Shelbourne intelligence. Riot control deployed faster than the IRA expected. The escalation was contained. 3 arrests during the chaos, all individuals identified from O'Brien's photographs. He learned about this outcome years later, during debriefing. At the time, he simply transmitted film and continued routine operations. November 1991. Peace talks accelerated. Political momentum shifted toward negotiation. O'Brien noticed changes in guest behavior. Fewer late-night meetings, more daytime conferences, less operational content in rooms, more political strategy documents. The intelligence value was shifting. The Shelbourne was transitioning from an IRA operations coordination point back toward a political meeting venue. The targets were becoming politicians rather than commanders. The distinction mattered because MI6's operational priorities were changing. Bombing prevention remained critical, but political intelligence about negotiating positions became equally valuable. O'Brien adapted. He photographed meeting agendas, position papers, draft proposals. Intelligence analysts could track Sinn Féin's internal debates about ceasefire terms. The information didn't prevent violence, but it informed British negotiating strategy. March 1992. O'Brien was summoned to an unusual meeting. Different location, different contact. A senior Garda officer explained that operational conditions were changing. Peace process stability required reducing provocative intelligence activities. The Shelbourne operation would be wound down over the next 6 months. O'Brien's initial reaction was relief. 6 years of sustained operational stress had accumulated. The psychological toll wasn't dramatic. No breakdowns, no compromised security, but the constant vigilance, the nightly risk calculations, the awareness that one mistake meant criminal prosecution. It had worn him down. The extraction planning began in April 1992. No dramatic exfiltration, no emergency flights. O'Brien would resign from the Shelbourne sighting family reasons. He would relocate to Canada under hospitality consultancy cover. The backstory was simple. Irish hotel management professional seeking international experience. References provided through a legitimate consultancy firm with undisclosed MI6 connections. The final operation occurred on September 12, 1992. At 0200 hours, O'Brien photographed his last guest register. 3 names. Routine political operatives. Nothing operationally significant. He secured the film, locked the drawer, and completed his shift. He resigned 2 weeks later. The hotel accepted his explanation without suspicion. 6 years of reliable service. Good references. Professional demeanor. No red flags. By November 1992, O'Brien had relocated to Toronto. Final payout totaled 288,000 Irish pounds, transferred through layered accounts that obscured origin. Enough to establish a legitimate consultancy business, enough to disappear into Canadian middle-class anonymity. Between 1986 and 1992, Asset D17 transmitted approximately 1,400 photographs containing operational intelligence. The documentation directly enabled 8 bombing prevention operations and 12 arrests. Indirectly, the intelligence contributed to broader pattern analysis that informed dozens of additional operations. No alarms were triggered during 6 years of hotel room access. Not once. No suspicious activity reports. No security reviews. The operation remained completely undetected. By October 1992, Garda Special Branch understood that Operation Shelbourne had concluded successfully. Every lead regarding how certain IRA commanders were identified ended in carefully constructed dead ends, suggesting sophisticated intelligence penetration. But no evidence pointed to the Shelbourne specifically. No witnesses. No forensic traces. No testimony. Official reactions were muted because officially nothing had occurred. The Irish government issued no statements because they had no knowledge of British operations on Irish soil. MI6 maintained complete deniability because no British operatives had conducted the intelligence gathering. Garda Special Branch preserved operational security because acknowledging cooperation would destabilize political relationships. The denials were transparent to those in intelligence circles, but transparency wasn't the point. Plausible deniability was the point. Everyone involved could maintain public positions while privately acknowledging operational reality. The strategic assessment within MI6 classified Operation Shelbourne as exceptional value relative to risk. The tactical achievement was clear. 73 IRA commanders and Sinn Féin operatives identified. 8 bombing attempts interdicted. 12 active service unit members arrested before deploying. The strategic value extended further. Intelligence gathered from the Shelbourne enabled pattern analysis of IRA command structures. Who met with whom? How often? Which operations involved which commanders? The sociometric mapping informed targeting priorities across other operations. But the operation revealed tradecraft elements that forced adaptation. Using hotels as intelligence platforms demonstrated effectiveness. It also demonstrated vulnerability. Once the methodology became known within intelligence communities, hotels became hardened targets. Counter-surveillance protocols evolved. IRA leadership began conducting security sweeps, random room changes, electronic surveillance detection. The cost calculations were complex. Diplomatically, had the operation been exposed, Anglo-Irish relations would have suffered severe damage. The Irish government had permitted limited intelligence cooperation under strict protocols. Covert operations inside the Republic violated those protocols fundamentally. The political fallout would have undermined years of carefully constructed trust. Operationally, the Shelbourne methodology required violating civil liberties on a sustained basis. Hotel privacy, guest confidentiality, the legal framework protecting civilian spaces from government intrusion. These weren't abstract concerns. They represented foundational principles that intelligence services theoretically existed to protect. For Patrick O'Brien, the consequences were exile disguised as opportunity. He'd saved lives by preventing bombings, but he'd done so by betraying professional ethics, violating hospitality norms, and participating in surveillance that would have resulted in criminal prosecution if discovered. MI6's assessment concluded that operational benefits outweighed costs. 8 prevented bombing attempts represented potentially dozens of civilian casualties avoided. Whether this calculation proved correct depends entirely on which framework you use for evaluation. The legacy extended beyond immediate tactical results. Operation Shelbourne altered intelligence doctrine across multiple services. Hotels became recognized as priority human environments, not just for accommodation surveillance, but for targeting hospitality staff as potential assets. Airlines followed. Rental car agencies, any civilian infrastructure where trusted access created intelligence opportunities. The lesson was ruthlessly clear. Access beats force. Penetrating hardened targets through frontal approaches wastes resources and risks exposure. But identifying trusted insiders within civilian spaces where targets relax operational discipline produces sustained intelligence with minimal footprint. This doctrine proliferated across intelligence services globally. The Shelbourne methodology appeared in CIA operations targeting diplomatic hotels, Mossad operations using airline personnel, FSB operations compromising hotel staff near foreign embassies. The specific tactics varied. The underlying principle remained consistent. The moral question remains unresolved. Patrick O'Brien never fired a weapon, never arrested anyone, never directly participated in violence. Yet his actions altered lives and possibly history. From one perspective, he saved civilians by stopping bombs before detonation. Preventing violence before it occurs represents the highest form of security work. From another perspective, he betrayed guests, violated privacy, and undermined the foundational trust that makes civilian hospitality function. Hotels operate on an implicit contract. You pay for accommodation. The staff maintains confidentiality. O'Brien converted that trust into an intelligence weapon. The paradox cuts deeper when considering the targets. Were they terrorists planning civilian casualties? Or were they political operatives navigating an asymmetric conflict using available methods? The answer reveals more about your framework for evaluating political violence than about the individuals themselves. Perspective A argues that the IRA's campaign targeted civilians deliberately. Enniskillen, Omagh, Birmingham. The list of civilian casualties justified any intelligence method that prevented future attacks. O'Brien's actions saved lives that would have been lost to bombings he helped prevent. Perspective B argues that British intelligence operations in Ireland perpetuated colonial dynamics under counter-terrorism justification. The Shelbourne operation violated Irish sovereignty, corrupted civilian institutions, and treated the Republic as an extension of British security architecture. O'Brien became complicit in that violation, regardless of individual attacks prevented. Both perspectives contain factual elements. Neither resolves the moral calculus cleanly. The question that survives historical analysis is this: when a conflict hides behind civilian spaces, does exploiting trust become necessary or unforgivable? Intelligence doctrine says necessity. Civil liberties frameworks say violation. The truth exists in the tension between those positions. What's your take on whether O'Brien was a hero preventing terrorism or a collaborator violating hospitality ethics? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider how intelligence operations intersect with civilian infrastructure, hit that like button and share this with someone who appreciates the moral complexity of counterterrorism work. Operation Shelbourne succeeded because one man controlled access when everyone else was asleep. The operation remained secret because no one questioned a night manager with a master key. And the legacy persists because the methodology proved that sometimes the most effective intelligence operations don't break doors. They wait for keys.